Hello everyone. Today, I want to tell you a story about a sibling rivalry. We all know the big brother of World War II American rifles. His name is the M1 Garand. You know him, he's the big, sturdy soldier, the hero who won the war, the one that goes ping when he's empty. He's the star of every movie and video game. But he had a rival. Think of this rival as the smarter, weirder, more elegant younger brother who never quite got the attention he deserved. This rifle didn't come from a government factory. It came from the brain of a Harvard lawyer who thought he could outsmart the entire U.S. Army. This is the story of the M1941 Johnson Rifle. It's a gun that looked a bit like a pregnant fish, worked like a cannon, and ended up fighting in the jungles of the Pacific even though the generals told it to stay home. Usually, when you hear about gun inventors, they are machinists. They are guys with grease under their fingernails who spent their whole lives in a factory. But Melvin Johnson? He was different. Melvin was a Boston elite. He went to Harvard Law School. He wore suits. He taught law classes. But he had a secret hobby. He was absolutely obsessed with guns. He was also a captain in the Marine Corps Reserves. In the late 1930s, the U.S. Army was just starting to adopt the M1 Garand. Melvin Johnson took one look at the Garand, and his lawyer brain started picking it apart. He basically said, "I can do better than this." He thought the Garand was too complicated. He thought it had too many fragile parts. So he went down to his family's basement, not a high-tech laboratory, and started sketching a rifle that would be the Garand killer. He named his prototype Betsy. If you look at this rifle, the first thing you notice is its belly. Right in the middle of the gun, it bulges out. It looks a bit odd, like a fish that ate too much. Soldiers even called it the fish belly. But this was actually a stroke of genius. The famous M1 Garand uses a little metal clip that holds 8 bullets. You shove the whole clip in, shoot 8 times, and the clip flies out with a loud ping. But here's the problem. What if you shoot 3 shots and the enemy runs away? You have 5 bullets left. With the Garand, it was really hard to add more bullets to a half-full gun. You were stuck with those 5 until you shot them all. Melvin Johnson looked at that and said, "That's silly." He designed a magazine that works exactly like a revolving door at a hotel. Inside that fish belly is a drum that spins. You can shove loose bullets into the side door one by one. The drum spins around and holds them. This meant you could hold 10 bullets, 2 more than the Garand. But the best part? You could top it off. If you shoot 4 shots, you can just shove 4 more into the side pocket while walking to the next hill. You never have to be empty. It was like having a bottomless cup of coffee, while the Garand guys had to finish their whole cup before they could get a refill. Now let's talk about how it actually shoots. Don't worry, I won't use boring engineering words. The M1 Garand works by stealing gas. When a bullet flies down the barrel, some of that expanding gas is siphoned off through a little hole to push a piston. It's effective, but it's dirty. It blows soot and carbon right back into the moving parts of the gun. Melvin Johnson said, "I don't want that dirt in my gun." So he used recoil. Think of an old pirate cannon. When you fire a cannon, the whole thing rolls backward, right? That is recoil. The Johnson rifle uses that same energy. When you pull the trigger, the bullet goes forward and the barrel itself, the actual metal tube, jumps backward about ½ an inch. It kicks back against a spring. Imagine 2 dancers holding hands tightly. One is the bolt, the part that loads the ammo, and one is the barrel. When the gun fires, they jump back together, locked in a tight hug. After a short jump, the barrel hits a wall and stops, but the bolt lets go and keeps flying back to throw out the empty shell. Because it uses this kick energy instead of dirty gas, the inside of the gun stays incredibly clean. You could shoot it all day, and it wouldn't get gummed up with carbon like the Garand. So, it held more bullets. It was cleaner. It could be reloaded easier. Why didn't the Army buy it? Well, there were 2 problems. One was money. The Army had already built huge factories for the Garand. Changing their minds in 1940 would have been a disaster. But the second problem was the bayonet. Remember how I said the barrel has to jump back like a cannon for the gun to work? Well, imagine if you attached a heavy knife, a bayonet, to the end of that cannon. It would be too heavy. The barrel would try to jump back, but the weight of the knife would slow it down. The dancers would trip over each other, and the gun would jam. The Army loved bayonet charges. They told Johnson, "If we can't stick a heavy knife on the end, we don't want it." Johnson tried to fix this by giving them a tiny, lightweight spike bayonet. It looked like a tent peg. In fact, later on, soldiers literally used them as tent pegs because they were useless for fighting. But the Army wasn't impressed. They said no thanks and stuck with the Garand. Melvin Johnson was stubborn. The U.S. Army said no, so he went to the Dutch. The Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia, were terrified that Japan was going to invade them. They ordered thousands of these rifles. But bad luck struck again. Before the rifles could be delivered, Japan invaded and captured the islands. Suddenly, there were thousands of brand-new Johnson rifles sitting on the docks in San Francisco with no owner. They were orphans. Enter the U.S. Marine Corps Paratroopers. These were the elite jumpers. They had a problem. The M1 Garand was long and heavy. You couldn't take it apart easily to fit in a jump bag. But the Johnson? Because the barrel wasn't attached to a gas tube, you could press a button and pop the barrel right off. It could break in half in seconds. The Marines looked at those orphan rifles sitting on the dock and said, "We'll take those." They basically borrowed them without asking the Army. So, the Johnson rifle went to war in the Pacific. It fought on islands like Guadalcanal and Bougainville. And the soldiers? They loved it. It was accurate and smooth. There is a famous story about a Marine named Sergeant Harry Tully. He was on the island of Gavutu. The Japanese snipers were hiding in caves and trees. Sergeant Tully took his Johnson rifle and started a duel with them. Because the Johnson barrel floats, it isn't clamped down tightly to the wood. It is very accurate. Sergeant Tully was hitting enemy soldiers at 800 yards. He knocked them out one by one. He was credited with taking out 42 enemies, largely thanks to the precision of Melvin's failed rifle. He won the Silver Star for that. The Marines also modified the sights. The jungle was dark, and the Japanese would attack at night in banzai charges. The Marines took files and cut the sights open to make them wider, so they could aim faster in the dark. If you ever find a Johnson rifle today with the sights sawed open, you know it was there in the jungle. We have to mention the rifle's sister. Melvin also made a light machine gun version called the Johnny Gun. It was incredibly light, half the weight of the standard Army machine gun. The Devil's Brigade, a mix of American and Canadian commandos, loved this thing. They took it to the mountains of Italy. It gave a small group of men the firepower of a whole platoon. After the war, the Johnson rifle had a strange second life. In the 1950s, a company called Winfield Arms bought all the leftovers. They sold them in magazines to hunters for about $70. They polished them up, put rubber pads on them, and sold them as deer rifles. And in 1961, the CIA bought a bunch of them for the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. Why? Because they wanted a gun that didn't look like a standard U.S. Army weapon, so they could deny being involved. So, Melvin's rifle was fighting communists on the beaches of Cuba 20 years after it was designed. Today, the M1941 Johnson is a rare collector's item. It costs thousands of dollars. Melvin Johnson didn't become famous like Garand or Browning, but he actually won in the long run. You see, the bolt inside his rifle, that gear-shaped piece that locks the bullet in, was copied. A friend of his named Eugene Stoner used that exact same idea to create a new rifle, the M16 and the AR-15. So, if you look at a modern military rifle today, deep inside, there's a little piece of DNA from the Harvard lawyer and his pregnant fish rifle. If you want to see exactly how that revolving door magazine works, or watch the barrel do its little recoil dance, you don't need to spend $10,000 on a real one. I used a program called World of Guns. Gun Disassembly to study this. They have this X-ray mode where you can strip the gun down to the tiniest screw and watch it fire in slow motion. It really helps you understand the genius of Melvin Johnson's design. Thanks for watching, and remember, Sometimes the loser of history is actually just ahead of his time.